Hello everyone and welcome back to the second segment of Fintech Ki Baat called Dhande Ki Baat. We are continuing our interesting conversation with Mr. Sathvik-Vishwanath, founder of Unocoin. In this segment, we are going to talk a bit more about his views on the crypto industry, and he's going to try to explain the concept of Bitcoin to us in 3 different levels of complexities. I hope I'm still able to understand that. Having said that, let's start off with a question that's kind of been eating away at me. What's the origin story of the name Unocoin? Why that name?
So it's actually due to my co-founder, Sunny. So his wife actually is a Colombian. So Uno means one in Spanish, right? So the idea was to say like one coin, kind of thing, right? So that was a very initial idea that they had. At that time, they were using it for they had the domain unocoin.com. They were just showing some curated news to bring some customers to the platform and such. But however, he had plans of doing some business out of it, maybe in the future. But he did not find the right team or people who could actually help him. So when he saw that we are trying to do whatever we're trying to do, he said, "Okay, fine, I'm happy to provide this domain for this particular purpose." So we thought, Uno is like a popular game in India, if you know, right? So where they play, and they know Uno is usually one, right? So it's like not so tough kind of thing. So that made us to accept that and use that as the domain for.
Got it. So one coin essentially then the first exchange in India, and the name is OneCoin.
There is one more, actually, OneCoin, which was a huge scam project, which was way later than when we started Unocoin, but I'm glad we didn't call ourselves as OneCoin.
That would have been disastrous.
Yeah, in the right.
Having said that, right, crypto has had some, a controversial reputation because of a lot of scams coming in, a lot of, lot of greedy people using the technology to kind of scam other people and all of that. But having said that, it's always been in the news for almost past 3-4 years for whatever reasons. But I'm still pretty sure most of the people don't understand what essentially Bitcoin is. Like, as of now, when I essentially talk to my friends who haven't either invested or एक आध बार ऐसे एक्सपेरिमेंट कर लिया because they got a bit greedy and like कि यार कल 2 दिन में 100% बढ़ गया ये coin, whatever coin they saw, and then like अभी Bitcoin में invest कर लेता वो भी बढ़ जाएगा type. That is how they kind of get pulled into the ecosystem. So the understanding is कि हाँ it's like a digital coin या digital currency जिसमें आप invest करते हो और 2 दिन में पैसा double. That's the understanding that some of these guys have, and whether some people do have a more nuanced understanding. But there is still essentially a general lack of understanding on the fundamentals, right? So let's get to it. Let's start off with Bitcoin as a concept, and it would be great if you can explain it in different levels of complexities. So let's start with the first level. It's explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old. How would you explain Bitcoin to a 5-year-old kid?
5 years could be tough. Maybe I can try for some 7 or 8 days. Right. So generally, see, what are the things they are familiar with? Maybe the classroom and friends, nothing else, right? So they obviously don't know anything much in the novel life. You cannot even talk about money. The most maybe they can talk about money is if there are some vending machines in the town, like maybe if they put some 50 rupees in a vending machine, you get a Coke 10 or something like that. So that's like the maximum. They don't go to actually purchase anything as well, right? So let's take the example of a classroom where there are like 10 people, and initially let's say we have distributed 10 chocolates to all of them, right? So now everyone is holding 10 chocolates, and everyone knows everyone have 10 chocolates, right?
Right.
So now how will the transactions happen, right? So it is like whoever want to give a chocolate to anyone else, they should stand and tell that, okay, my name is Priya and I'm giving it to Shreya. I'm giving 3 chocolates to her, right? And everyone will make a small note that, okay, now Priya only have 7 and now Shreya have 3. 13, right? So everyone is making that kind of note. So what this simple thing achieved is no one can generate chocolates because it will only keep on getting redistributed and such. And no one can give a same chocolate again, which was already given out. So now if again Priya stands and says, I'm giving 9 chocolates to Nabila, Asha, something like that, then people will say, nah, you just have 7. He already gave 3 to Shreya, right? So, so as long as this simple concept, they can understand, that's exactly how the Bitcoin works. So everyone knows how much Bitcoin is held by everyone. And whenever they are trying to send any Bitcoin to others, it's a declaration of who is sending to whom, even though not at identity level, but at anonymity encrypted level. Where they just do the required debit and credits, and that's pretty much how everyone keeps tag of it. So there is no need for a teacher in this particular classroom. Because everything is completely transparent and accountable, and everyone knows who has how many chocolates at any point of time. That should be as simple. I think that's exactly how Bitcoin is designed to work. In
interesting,
the simplest of the manner. I think.
I think that was a pretty good rendering of. I think I'm able to grasp the concepts a lot more easier now. I think the distributed ledger piece and specifically, the basically synchronizing the data across multiple nodes. That makes sense. Yeah. Having said that, let's kind of amp it up a little bit. Let's kind of try to explain it to someone who is just passed out of 12th grade.
Yeah. So I would tell them that. There are like the computers which are keeping track of balances of everyone. So there is nothing like a centralized one system. Anyone can join their computer to this particular network. And these computers all together are making sure that every transaction that is happening is authentic in nature, and keeping track of who has how much of this Bitcoin. So Bitcoin itself is obviously existing. It's not existing in any form or shape. It's absolutely digital in nature. So it is born on the internet and stays on the internet. It will never come out of the internet.
True.
I think because they understand internet network, that should be okay for them to get that. Okay, it's like no one is there in between. Everyone is totally responsible, and they are only doing that work if there is authenticity. And if they still do anything wrong, then others won't accept it, because everyone can verify.
Right.
Not only just listen, but also verify whether it is true or not.
No, makes sense. No, I think that was a pretty good progression. Having said that, let's try to understand it at the highest level of complexity. Someone who's about to make a business decision to use distributed ledger technology into their own business, and they want to understand how Bitcoin works.
Yeah, for them, I would say it's an open source programming language, so there is nothing hidden in it. How exactly it works, right? So anyone can read that code and with some efforts be able to understand. And you can read it, understand it, only then trust that particular network. So it is open source and it is decentralized, because it's not one person, but everyone combined is responsible. But the interesting concept starts here. It is not just open source and decentralized, but it's also the currency and payment network. So currency as in, like, whatever is valuable. Indian rupees is valuable, gold is valuable, you have dollar, whatever you can use as a value, having the value to exchange for products or services, right? So it's not only like a currency, but also a payment network. Payment network means like Western Union, SWIFT network, NEFT. Then you have Visa, MasterCard, Discover. So all of these are like payment network. They are not currency by itself. They just facilitate the movement of currency on top of them. But when it comes to Bitcoin, it is actually both. You send Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network, and Bitcoin network only supports Bitcoin, and Bitcoin can only be sent on the Bitcoin network. So it's 1:1. So now what this kind of achieved is that because we totally removed the middleman. There is no one in between to charge fees, and also there is no extra delay. It's as simple as sending a message. People are able to send the money. So when people, let's say, what are your efforts to send a WhatsApp message to a person next door? So it's the same efforts even if you want to send to a person across the world. So there is no difference in your efforts. But when it comes to money, it's just not different, right? So if you want to send it to this, then today you use like mobile number, UPI and such, but try sending similarly to some unknown person maybe in US. It's not that easy, right? So there is you need a payment gateway, then you may need a credit card, then there is a processor in between, the conversion agent has to do. So lot of them happens behind the scenes, but there is so much of people who need to make that happen. It is definitely not as simple as sending a message, right? So, and on the other side, we also totally understand that when you're sending money, what is exchanging is still information. The real money, no one is taking from one side and giving it to the other side. It's just authenticated, encrypted information that people are honoring, saying that, okay, if it is coming from this person, I honor it. It's the third person who sits in between, like a bank, right?
Got it.
So now when it comes to the Bitcoin, because it's both a currency and also a payment network, and there is no third person, it now needs to support the transactions. It also needs to hold the ledger, so both of it. Right. So yeah, that's how actually this Bitcoin is kind of designed to work. All of that is available on the source code. Anyone can read it. So in simply put, Bitcoin is like the world's first open source, decentralized digital currency and payment network. So that's how I would explain it to someone. And now comes the business case for what they want to use the technology for and how they can utilize this, which is not by anyone but from everyone, and then reduce the dependency on third party, increase the transparency and accountability. So wherever this makes sense, then maybe there is something the business can do to utilize such blockchain.
True, I think that was pretty interesting. That gave me a few new insights as well into the entire value chain. Having said that, I think I recently read somewhere about basically that the DLT technology essentially is a lot more older than we think, right? It dates back to, if I'm not wrong, 1980s as such, and that was essentially an eye-opener. I think a year and a half back is when I read this, and not a lot of people know about it. So would you be able to kind of quickly take us through the origin story of Bitcoin and the DLT behind it?
I mean, when it comes to Bitcoin, I think the biggest missing piece that was not popular enough for something like that to work is the internet itself, right? So,
right,
people were supposed to be interconnected for anything like this to work. But then people knew how to maintain ledgers. I mean, we know how to maintain ledgers since forever. I don't even know if it's that, right? So then if it is... it was a distributed ledger. Let's say there is sometimes three-way transactions. So one has to give some money to other, and that there is another settlement that has to do from other one. Eventually you settle between the first and third person and try to square off those things, right? So those were all everyone is maintaining their own ledger, right? So it's kind of distributed, I would say, and because everyone is holding their own ledger, they don't need to depend upon the data in others' ledger. Right. So, but these things used to work. I would say, if you remember, when we were all children, we used to learn. Earlier in the Stone Age, people used to do transactions using barter system. Right. So it could be the Stone Age, maybe a little bit modern age, then weapons age. So you can call that, right? So. What is barter system? You're giving something and the person in return is giving you something else that you want. Okay, true. But if you actually watch it a little bit closely, let's say there is one brick manufacturer and there is one who is growing rice. Okay, so the brick manufacturer's product, which is brick, is needed by that farmer maybe once or twice in his lifetime. But the brick manufacturer himself will actually need rice for food every day. So what are the chances that when they try to do a transaction, both will have the need at that time, right? So that's like extremely rare. Out of, let's say, 40-50 years of their journey together in the same village, maybe 2 years is when they actually they will be able to square off at that moment of time, because both are in need of each other. Others, they say, okay, I need the food, but on the other side, he says that I don't need the break. Now, what will you do? It's like a tricky situation, right? So, like this, everyone took different professions and such, but it was too tough to square off everything at same point in time, and even lot of times the rate at which you want to exchange may not work, right? So the brick manufacturer may say that, look, I'll give you 100 bricks, but I want grains for next 2 years. They say that, no, I cannot do so much. I can only give you 18 months. Then where will it settle? And if that negotiation doesn't happen, then actually they don't have grain. And there may not be hundreds of farmers where you'll be able to bid against each other and try to get it, right? So this was like a very, very tricky thing. So technically what people used to do there was remember, right? So remember who owes what to whom and when it is promised to be settled. Right? So then if they have about 20 different professions in a village, people used to remember, right? So, okay, 3 years ago, I got this done from him. I have to settle him somewhere in the future. And there is, okay, I got break from this guy enough for so much. And I said, I will continue paying him, giving him rice for next 20 years, whatnot, right? So that calculation, people used to remember, and not only one person, everyone should remember who owes what to whom, kind of thing. So that I would say is distributed ledger, right? So not depending on one person, but same data, everyone, it's available with everyone. So even if one person passes away, if it goes, the information goes to the exchange, they send the same copy of the ledger that the whole desk is there, right? And because they have that personal connections, it's easy to remember, okay, this person should give to this person should give to this, kind of thing. But now, just apply it on the internet, like no one knows anyone, right? And how do you identify each other? By using like an identifier, right? Kind of thing, right? So depending upon that, yeah, it's a distributed ledger. I think it dates back before we even know what is date, I guess. Dependingly, you can talk about how this became more organized maybe 40 years ago, and how it got used to the distributed currency and payment network in 2009, which is Bitcoin. So it is just the evolution of one steps at a time, right? So we can talk, if you're talking about Pushpaka Vimana, like Vimana kind of thing, you can talk how it was there in Ramayana, Mahabharata ages itself.
Right.
Then there are some instances, and today it is common, right? So there is you cannot date back to the imagination, invention and such. But but that barter system mechanism, like it's very, very convincing explanation saying that there had to be a distributed ledger there, else people could not. It was like impossible, right? So I think that was the kind of origin. But when it comes to Bitcoin, the biggest challenge actually, how I face it, right? So the 3 to 4 days of delay and the expenses of making the transaction. There should not be too much of money that you have to spend to send money. So money is at the end designed to go from one person to one person in exchange for products and services. But for that transfer of money, why you again need to pay money? It actually doesn't make sense, right? So, and especially when that is happening as percentage. So the people in between do the exact same work to make that happen. But because of the way they have designed their systems, they're like 3%, 5%. What is 3%, 5%? I still don't get it, right? So now people think about they have to write off the risks. There are compliances. There are people who need to get paid. Company is run by that. And payment gateway or payment networks are one of the biggest businesses in the world. And my biggest question is why? Right, so we ourselves has made this system so complicated, and having different rules in different countries, and whenever these kinds of payments need to go from one hand to one hand, it's becoming ridiculously expensive. If you're using for example debit card, fine, money is there in the bank. You're giving the debit card number online to the merchant who just need to debit your money. Why you have to pay 1.5% for it? Right? So it is, it's kind of the question continue to be there. I understand there are risks. Sometimes chargebacks happen. Then there are technologies to be built behind it, servers to be paid. And all of that just gets eliminated by making it distributed. Why you want to pay 1%? It's just like everyone is a part of it and you pay money. It's like, say for example, at one point of time, gold was used like universal currency. Right. To pay, one person has to pay to another person. Yeah, they have to physically meet. That's like one thing. But that's pretty much it. There is extra money to be paid just because you are paying money. I think so. Yeah, that actually led to the invention of Bitcoin. So make transactions simple, fast, free.
No, makes sense, right? But in even in these systems of Bitcoins, there is also a concept of gas or whatever the equivalent is in the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Which essentially burns off a certain token, certain amount of tokens every time you kind of transact.
That's right. See, but we have to understand that at a concept level, right? So, why that is actually a mandatory thing is just because, for example, if sending emails was 100% free, even if you can sell millions or billions, then people will totally misuse it. Right? The moment you say, I've been sending emails is not costly. Maybe let's say whenever you send one email, you pay me 2 paisa or 5 paisa. Right? So for a normal human like me and you, for whoever are doing and sending that, and in a month, if I have to pay 3 rupees or 5 rupees, I don't mind, right? So instead of me and you paying it, usually it is advertisers or market people, and those people will end up paying it and covering it. So it's not like someone is absolutely running the service, free of cost for you. But now what happens? Like how I was saying, if it was absolutely free, then it will just become spam-based transactions, right? So it's just one transaction, they'll do 1 million. And everyone has to bother about, authenticating million transactions and recording it on the ledger and such. So, and then if you do like that, then the amount of data that I accumulate as a computer, right? So, will continue to grow without even reason. I could just spam the network saying that I hold 2 of my own addresses and send Bitcoin from one another and keep on swapping millions of times a day. Right? It's like a lot of data, and that's why what we have is we have the kind of restriction, like on an average every 10 minutes 1 MB of data can be written to this kind of thing. So now what happens when you are writing that, which is only available for 1 MB, which supports about 700-800 transactions or so. Now comes who is giving the priority, like what is the priority for that to be written if people are doing the transactions, right? So then comes to say that, okay, whoever is paying this thing called mining fees, whoever is paying, it's voluntary in nature, but whoever is paying maximum of it, they will get the highest kind of priority. So now what happens whenever people are doing these transactions, then it has to get recorded, which in about 1 MB of the space that gets allocated on an average every 10 minutes. Right? And how the transactions are fighting for that space there in it. And once it is recorded in it, which actually exists and persists forever, there is a small cost associated, right? So people have to pay for it so that there is a value in it. But here is the best part, right? That particular money that you pay for towards the mining fees, which means to record it in that particular blockchain, which is like a book, it is not depending upon the percentage of the money that you are sending. Whether you are sending 1,000 rupees worth of Bitcoin, 1 lakh rupees worth of Bitcoin, 1 crore rupees worth of Bitcoin, the mining fees, which is like a number and some information that is written in this thing called blockchain, that fees is same, right? So, and because no one is underwriting it, no one is taking risk for it, no one is processing it separately, the efforts for the computer to process a transaction of 1 Bitcoin is same as I Bitcoin, is same as 0.001 Bitcoin as well. It's like exactly.
Got it.
So this is how it actually becomes very different.
The gas fee is flat essentially over there.
I think it's kind of flat. I mean, you can voluntarily increase it to get the space in that blockchain sooner, as it usually takes like 20 minutes for the transaction.
Right.
But there are actually...
For a faster transaction, you can increase the bit.
Yeah, a little bit, right? So, but actually there are other technologies like Lightning Network on top of Bitcoin, which is like a layer on top of the Bitcoin network itself, which makes the transaction much more cheaper and instantaneous. It is like, how it used to be like people used to write checks from one bank to one bank, and then it used to be NEFT, which it used to take about half a day, and then we got RTGS, which is better. Then we have like UPI, like IMPS or UPI, right? So eventually it only got better. So you see, for example, these banks, for example, right? For every transaction that is happening, let's say between ICICI and HDFC, there is no one who is going and depositing money from one branch to one branch. But at the end of the day, they just do the reconciliation. What were the differences? It gets settled at the end, right? So that's how they actually do it. Right? So similarly, there are networks which actually provide these kinds of transactions to happen, and every with some frequency of few days or so, it just settles to the actual whatever the differences to the main network, and still make the transaction. So all those technologies are already in place because it's open source in nature, and it's like really good engineers and developers who actually work on this, right? So if there is a challenge, it's usually at a technical level, right? And figure out a way to definitely scale it up. The first car that was invented was slower than bullock cart, right? So now you have cars which are like 300 kilometers per hour, I think, easily. So it's an engineering challenge. You can just do it. At one time we had maybe modem based 56.6 kbps was highest we could ever get for a household internet. But now you have leased lines and this broadbands and such. 100 mbps is so easy for everyone. So yeah, that's what it will be capable of achieving. It only get better, and without middlemen is the best way of doing transactions. That's I accept that.
Indeed. On that note, right, I think this is a perfect segue for a little interesting thought experiment. How do you think essentially the economy would be different if we had a decentralized stable coin as a mainstay currency?
See, that's kind of very similar to saying, what if we go back to a time when gold was used as universal currency? It's like there in multiple places, it is mined in so many places, efforts are put, and there are people who get some gold, they use that gold to spend, and there is no one who is centrally controlling it, and it's like so global in nature, everyone values gold. So it will be like that. I think it is like the best thing for that to happen. But now comes when you say stable coin. Should I say stable coin in dollars? Should I say stable coin in rupees? In what kind of currency am I calling it a stable coin? I think it should not even be linked to any currency, right? So it is technically supposed to be an independent of any currency. That's exactly where what is Bitcoin, right? So if it is not dependent, okay, it's not like $1 is on Bitcoin. It is not pegged to any dollar. It's not pegged to any asset, like gold or anything. It's like totally independent, and all that is there is the market for it, depending upon how much they want to buy and sell. And now it's if you say stable coin, you are the only way you can call it a stable coin is it is stable compared to something like maybe dollar.
And the stability here essentially is derived from the fact that if I go with, let's say, 1 unit of that coin to a shop, for example McDonald's, and I buy the McBurger. So today also, if I'm paying one coin, tomorrow also, or even 1 month down the line also, I should be able to buy the same burger for the same price until and unless the restaurant increases the price. So stability in the sense of holding the value.
Totally, right? So now you are trying to link the price of burger to one coin. right? So, and you are saying that that's how we are trying to establish the stability of that particular coin, and which is actually like tricky nature. So someone would come and say that I want to link one coin to one laptop. Other could say that I want to link one coin to one television and whatnot, right? So it makes it like super tricky. So it has to be independent of anything. Be it object or a service, right? So it is similar to how gold used to be there. I mean, gold was not like 1 unit of something is 1 unit of gold. That's not the case. Gold has its own value. Its value is determined by the market, and then everyone based the objects and services based upon the particular gold, and they were charging it, right? So I would actually call that to be very stable in nature. It is not depending on anything. When it is not depending on anything, what do you measure the stability against? Actually, it doesn't exist, right? So there is nothing called stable. And if you actually say stable coin based upon rupees, actually rupees itself is not stable. Dollar itself is not stable. Like, what is stable, right? So how do you measure stability? It actually makes it complicated. So I think if you try to answer all these questions, it will come down to saying there is nothing called stable, but everyone, whatever is determined, and as long as people's perceived value of that particular coin will not significantly change over time, and they'll be able to get whatever they're doing, it will be good. So now, why your other continuation of the comment was, if I can get a burger today, even after 1 month or 1 year or 10 years, I should still be able to get the burger, right? Technically, that is true, but there is this concept called inflation, right? So where the new money will keep on getting introduced again and again and again and again. That actually makes it less valuable. So what you could buy today, you can only buy 90% of it next year, or maybe in another 2 years, right? So the value of that money is kind of decreasing. So that is a very tricky part when it comes to the fiat currency, because it's usually the government and the central banks which should decide if they want to create more money in the country, and that is actually like taxing people without people knowing that they're getting taxed. So that's how I would actually compare it as. But when it comes to the Bitcoin, such thing don't exist. It's comparatively it's deflationary, right? So which means it's not deflationary by itself, and because the fiat currency through which we measure the price of Bitcoin is inflationary, it will look as if the Bitcoin is deflationary, right? So okay, so what was available through the Bitcoin, maybe if you had to pay 1 Bitcoin for 5,000 rupees worth of item 10 years ago, today you only have to pay like 0.0005 or something, right? So it's like extremely less, right? And why it has happened? One side is true because it's new in technology and people want a piece of it. But let's say if that technology and innovation aspect is completely taken away, and we only consider the payment currency and payment network part of it, it will still appear deflationary, because everything else in the fiat currencies like Indian rupees is like inflationary. So you'll be able to get more, right? And you cannot create Bitcoin out of thin air. There is no such central authority who can say that, okay, this year we're introducing 2 more millions of Bitcoin. So in total, the number of Bitcoins that can ever exist is like 21 million, which is like 2.1 crores. With the population of 700 crores, if I just divide it, so everyone will only get their share of 0.003 Bitcoin. That's like maximum Bitcoin. If everyone gets, then you have all Bitcoin distributed. That's like end of it, right? So, and only it gets swapped from 1% to 1%. So yeah, it is stable by itself, and it should be inflationary. It should not be inflationary in nature, and it is neither deflationary nor inflationary when it comes to Bitcoin, but it looks deflationary because everything else is increasing. It is having the value being decreased over a period of time, like Indian rupees and dollars, I think. So that's how it is. It will be an interesting thing to see that kind of world where there is no middleman. Transactions are happening, no extra time taken, and no fees extra to be paid. It's like the best world, I guess.
Indeed. I think that was really an interesting school of thought, and I think in a utopian kind of a scenario, it would make sense. But I mean, I think there are a lot of forces with vested interests essentially who would probably not want that to happen.
Yeah, and we are all the ones responsible for creating those kinds of sources. I mean, us, our ancestors, their ancestors, etc. So it has become such a centralized system, and especially there's whenever it's centralized, there are two big issues, right? If it is not centralized system and everyone is a part of the entire system, their only job is improvement, right? So if they are improving, everyone else is improving, and the entire system is improving. But when it comes to centralized systems, where like you have and the hierarchy that establishes for every node or every person in that kind of system, their biggest job is to make sure that they hold position, because that position exists only like limited number of seats and such, and also to figure out how to go up in the position. And if it is a decentralized system, what do you mean by higher position? It's like nothing.
Right.
You join when you want to join, you leave when you want to leave. Whenever you join, you are like everyone else. When you leave, you are no one, and you again join whenever you want. Right. Then you have no vested interest in holding your position, because that exists for you forever. And then there is nothing like improvement in position. So when you are joining that system, you are only contributing for the betterment of the system, and that's your only aim. And that's exactly when you can actually see improvement than people trying to hold their positions and going up system, and then one person trying to trick others to go to the better positions. See, such don't even exist. It's like such a magical system. You come when you want, you leave when you want. When you are there, you are like everyone. When you are not there, you are no one. That's it. Simple.
Right. Yeah, idealistic dream.
Yeah.
I think,
and if there is an improvement, everyone has to vote, right? So
of course.
And if more, and it's again like the government, right? So if everyone, if they're voting more than half of it, it will get implemented, and if it's not, it won't get implemented. So it's like, why you need such centralized systems will also be a big question going forward, right? So, but people have to establish trust with these kinds of systems. Maybe 20 years, 30 years, 40 years down the lane, this could be much more useful, I guess.
Of course. No, it makes sense. Or probably a zero trust system, rather.
Yeah, you can call it that way. You don't need to trust. You don't need to trust. You don't need to trust anyone, but you're trusting everyone as a whole. Yeah.
Indeed. No, I think that has been pretty interesting, and I think we have quite overrun our time as well. I think this was a pretty interesting conversation with you, Sathvik. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here. And yeah, I mean, looking forward to a few more interesting conversations with you in the future as well.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me for the show. I'm glad I could join you to share my thoughts. Thank you, Shreyas.
Pleasure.